There are moments in life when everything becomes loud, yet your heart feels strangely quiet. You are surrounded by messages, signs, reminders, opportunities, and warnings, but somehow you keep moving without truly stopping to reflect. You scroll, you rush, you worry, you plan, but deep inside there is still a question you don't fully answer. Am I actually listening or just hearing? Because sometimes the message you need most is not something new, it is something you have already been receiving, but overlooked in the noise of your own life. And when the heart becomes too busy with everything else, even the clearest guidance can feel distant. But what if this very moment is not random? What if it is not just another pause in your day, but a quiet invitation to return, to realign, to wake up before something slips away? Life has a way of making us believe that we have endless time, endless chances to fix what we delay. Yet every passing day is also a reminder that nothing is guaranteed except this present moment. And in that moment there are whispers of guidance, gentle pulls toward reflection, and silent calls meant specifically for you. The question is not whether you are being guided, the question is whether you are paying attention. Divine reminders are not always loud, and they are not always dramatic. In fact, most of the time they are extremely subtle. They are woven into everyday life in a way that many people pass by without noticing. A moment of loss, a sudden change of plans, an unexpected delay, a feeling of discomfort in something you were once comfortable with, or even a quiet thought that interrupts your normal routine. These are all forms of reminders that often go unrecognized. The challenge is not that the reminders are absent, but that the heart becomes too busy, too distracted, or too occupied to truly notice them. Life has a way of pulling attention in multiple directions at once. There is always something demanding focus, whether it is work, responsibilities, conversations, or even internal thoughts that never seem to settle. In that constant movement, the ability to pause and reflect slowly weakens. A person begins to function on autopilot, responding to life rather than deeply engaging with it. And when that happens, even the most meaningful signs can pass through without leaving an impact. Yet, despite all of that, guidance continues to appear. It does not stop simply because it is ignored. It adjusts its form, it reappears in different situations, and it finds new ways to reach the heart. Sometimes it comes through people who say something that unexpectedly touches you. Sometimes it comes through situations that force you to rethink your choices. And sometimes it comes through feelings that you cannot fully explain, but that quietly shift your awareness in a certain direction. The interesting part is that divine reminders are often not separate from daily life. They are embedded within it. A conversation you overhear, a message you stumble upon, a moment of silence in an otherwise busy day, or even a personal struggle that makes you pause longer than usual. These are not random fragments of life. They often carry meaning that only becomes clear when you reflect on them later. But in the moment they are easy to overlook because they do not announce themselves as something significant. Many people expect guidance to come in a very clear and unmistakable form. They imagine it as something obvious, something impossible to ignore. But real life rarely works that way. Most of the time, guidance feels like a gentle nudge rather than a forceful push. It respects your ability to choose, to think, and to decide. That is why it often appears in subtle ways, allowing space for reflection rather than removing the need for it. There are also times when reminders come through discomfort. Situations that do not go as planned, relationships that become complicated, or moments of uncertainty that disrupt your sense of stability. These experiences are not always easy to understand in the moment. They can feel frustrating or even painful, but they often serve a deeper purpose. They interrupt the flow of routine and force you to step back and think about your direction, your priorities, and your connection with what truly matters. The problem is that when life becomes too comfortable, the heart can become unaware. Comfort creates a sense of stability that can slowly turn into neglect. A person may feel fine on the surface, but internally they may drift further away from reflection without even realizing it. That is why reminders sometimes come in the form of change, not because change is meant to harm, but because it is meant to awaken. Even moments of gratitude can be reminders when viewed with awareness. A simple blessing that goes unnoticed until it is taken away, or a situation where you suddenly realize how much you had without appreciating it fully. These realizations often come after reflection, but they were present all along, waiting to be acknowledged. The challenge is to recognize them before they become memories instead of present awareness. It is also important to understand that reminders are deeply personal. What affects one person deeply might not affect another in the same way. This is because every individual is at a different stage in their journey with different experiences, struggles, and needs. What reaches the heart of one person may simply pass by another. That does not mean the reminder is less important, it simply means it is meant for those who are ready to receive it. Sometimes a single moment of clarity can shift an entire perspective. A realization that comes unexpectedly can make a person rethink years of habits or decisions. These moments often feel small at first, but their impact grows over time. They create awareness where there was once routine, reflection where there was once distraction, and understanding where there was once confusion. But for these reminders to truly have an effect, there has to be willingness to listen. Not just hearing words or observing events, but actually allowing them to enter the heart and create reflection. Without that openness, even the clearest signs can lose their meaning. It is not about the strength of the message, but about the readiness of the person receiving it. There is also a quiet mercy in how reminders continue to come again and again. Even when ignored, they do not immediately disappear. There is patience in the way they return in different forms, giving multiple chances for awareness to develop. This repetition is not accidental. It reflects a continuous opportunity to reconnect, to reflect, and to realign. Over time, those who begin to pay attention notice a change. They start to see meaning in places they once overlooked. They become more reflective, more aware of their choices, and more conscious of the direction they are heading in. Life does not necessarily become easier, but it becomes more meaningful because nothing feels entirely random anymore. And in that awareness, even ordinary moments begin to carry depth. A quiet morning, a delayed plan, a conversation that lingers in the mind of each of these begins to feel like part of something larger. Not because life itself has changed, but because perception has changed. The same world is now being seen through a more attentive heart. Distraction is something that doesn't always feel harmful at first. In fact, many distractions come in forms that feel normal, even enjoyable, even necessary. Life today is filled with constant movement of information, conversations, entertainment, responsibilities, and endless thoughts competing for attention. A person wakes up and immediately steps into a stream of messages, notifications, plans, and expectations. Without even realizing it, the mind becomes occupied from the very beginning of the day until the moment sleep takes over again. The real danger of distraction is not that it is loud, but that it is continuous. It does not always interrupt life in a noticeable way. Instead, it slowly fills every empty space, leaving very little room for reflection. A person may still be functioning, still achieving tasks, still engaging with life, but internally something very important begins to fade. The ability to pause, to think deeply, and to reflect honestly starts becoming less frequent. When the heart is constantly distracted, it becomes difficult to recognize what truly matters. Priorities start to blur. Things that once felt meaningful may begin to feel distant, while things that are temporary start to take center stage. The mind becomes trained to move quickly from one thing to another without staying long enough to fully process or understand anything deeply. In that state, even important truths can pass by without leaving an impact. One of the most subtle effects of distraction is that it creates the illusion of being occupied with life, while actually disconnecting a person from deeper awareness. A person may feel busy all the time, but busyness is not the same as purpose. Activity is not the same as direction, and noise is not the same as understanding. Yet distraction often confuses these differences, making everything feel equally important when in reality it is not. There is also an emotional impact that comes with constant distraction. When the mind never settles, the heart rarely finds peace. Even moments of rest are filled with thoughts, worries, or external input. Silence becomes uncomfortable, not because silence itself is harmful, but because the mind is no longer used to it. And in that discomfort, people often return to distraction instead of reflection, continuing the cycle without realizing it. Distraction also affects how a person connects with themselves. Deep self-awareness requires moments of stillness, moments where a person can honestly look at their thoughts, their actions, and their direction in life. But when every moment is filled with something external, there is very little opportunity for that kind of internal conversation. As a result, a person may go through long periods without truly checking in with their own heart. Another hidden effect of distraction is that it weakens consistency in reflection. Even when a person feels a moment of clarity or awareness, it is often short-lived. The next wave of activity quickly pulls attention away, and the insight that was just gained slowly fades into the background. Over time, this creates a pattern where awareness appears in flashes but does not stay long enough to create lasting change. What makes distraction even more challenging is that it often feels harmless or even necessary. People convince themselves that they are simply keeping up with life, staying informed, or staying connected. And while engagement with the world is not wrong in itself, the problem begins when there is no balance, when external input completely overwhelms internal reflection. At that point, a person is no longer guiding their attention is being guided for them. There is also a deeper level where distraction affects spiritual awareness. When the heart is constantly occupied, it becomes harder to recognize subtle reminders or moments of reflection. Guidance does not always come in loud or obvious ways. Sometimes it appears in quiet thoughts, small realizations, or brief moments of clarity. But if the mind is too busy, those moments can easily pass unnoticed. Not because they are absent, but because there is no space left to receive them. Over time, distraction can make a person feel disconnected without fully understanding why. There may be a sense of emptiness even in the middle of activity, or a feeling that something important is missing even when life appears full. That feeling often comes from the lack of stillness, the lack of reflection, and the lack of meaningful internal connection that distraction gradually replaces. It is also worth noticing how distraction changes the way time is experienced. Days can pass quickly without leaving a strong sense of memory or reflection. Weeks can go by filled with activity but lacking depth. When a person is constantly distracted, time feels like it is moving fast, but life feels less meaningful in hindsight. This is because meaningful experiences are often tied to awareness, and awareness requires presence. The struggle with distraction is not about removing every form of engagement or avoiding responsibilities. It is about recognizing how easily attention can be scattered and how important it is to reclaim moments of stillness. Without those moments, it becomes difficult to understand direction, purpose, or even personal growth. Reflection is what gives meaning to experience, and without it, experience becomes fragmented. Even small moments of awareness can begin to shift this pattern. A brief pause during a busy day, a moment of silence without external input, or a simple reflection before making a decision can suddenly rebuild the ability to focus inward again. These moments may seem insignificant, but they are often the beginning of regaining clarity. The truth is that distraction does not need to be eliminated completely, but it does need to be understood. Once a person becomes aware of how easily attention can drift, they can begin to take small steps to bring it back. Not through force, but through intention. Not through isolation, but through balance. And in that balance, the heart begins to recover its ability to reflect, understand, and recognize what truly matters beyond the constant noise of life. Every person goes through moments in life where things don't make sense. You try your best, you make plans, you think ahead, and still you end up facing situations you never expected. In those moments, it becomes very easy to feel lost, confused, or even frustrated. You start asking why things are happening the way they are, why certain doors remain closed, and why some paths feel blocked no matter how much effort you put in. But often what feels like confusion is actually a form of redirection that you are not yet able to fully understand. Life has a way of shifting people away from what they think they want and guiding them toward what they actually need. The challenge is that this guidance does not always feel comfortable in the beginning. When something is taken away or when a plan falls apart, the immediate reaction is usually disappointment. You focus on what did not happen, on what was lost, or on what did not go according to expectation. But over time, with reflection, you begin to see that not everything that does not work out is a loss. Sometimes what you call a setback is actually a protection that you only understand later. You may be stopped from entering a situation that seemed good at first, only to realize much later that it would have caused harm, stress, or long-term difficulty. At the time, it feels like rejection. It feels like something unfair has happened. But with distance and perspective, the picture becomes clearer. What felt like denial was actually direction. Redirection often works quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not come with explanation in the moment. Instead, it appears through changes in circumstances, unexpected delays, or shifts in opportunity. A person may feel like they are stuck, but in reality, they are being moved away from something that is not aligned with their path. The difficulty is that while it is happening, it is hard to see beyond the current situation. You are too close to it to understand the larger design behind it. There are also times when redirection comes through discomfort. A situation that once felt stable may begin to feel unsettled. A relationship that once seemed right may start to show cracks. A plan that once felt certain may begin to fall apart. These experiences are not random. They often serve as signals that something is not meant to continue in its current form. But instead of recognizing it as guidance, people often try to force things back into place, holding on to what is already shifting away. One of the most difficult parts of redirection is letting go. Human nature tends to hold on to familiarity, even when it is no longer beneficial. There is comfort in what is known, even if it is not ideal. So when life begins to redirect, there is resistance. A person tries to rebuild what is breaking, revive what is fading, or force outcomes that are no longer aligned. But sometimes the more you resist, the more exhausting the process becomes. It is only when a person begins to release control that clarity starts to appear. Letting go does not mean giving up on effort or hope. It means accepting that not everything is meant to stay, and not everything is meant to continue in the way you imagined. When you stop forcing direction, you begin to notice the subtle ways in which life is already guiding you elsewhere. Redirection also plays a role in shaping character. When plans do not go as expected, a person is often pushed into reflection. They begin to think more deeply about their choices, their goals, and their direction in life. This reflection can lead to growth that would not have occurred if everything had gone smoothly. Struggles create awareness, and awareness leads to transformation. There is also a hidden timing in redirection that becomes clear only later. Something that seems delayed or blocked in one phase of life may actually align perfectly with another phase. If it had happened earlier, it may not have fit your circumstances or your readiness. But when it arrives at the right moment, it feels different. It feels aligned, natural, and fitting in a way that was not visible before. Another important aspect of redirection is that it often protects people from versions of themselves they have not yet outgrown. There are situations you are not ready for, even if you believe you are. There are responsibilities, outcomes, and environments that require a level of maturity, strength, or clarity that you may still be developing. Redirection delays access not as punishment, but as preparation. Over time, when you look back at your life, you begin to notice patterns. Things that once felt like failures were actually turning points. Situations that once felt painful were actually protective. Choices that were taken away were replaced with better ones later. This reflection does not always come immediately, but when it does, it changes how you understand your past. Even in moments of confusion, there is movement happening that is not always visible. What feels like standing still may actually be a transition phase where things are being arranged in the background. You may not see progress in real time, but that does not mean progress is not occurring. Often life works in ways that only become clear when you are far enough from the situation to see the full picture. Redirection teaches patience in a very real way. Not the kind of patience that is theoretical, but the kind that is experienced through waiting, adjusting, and continuing despite uncertainty. It teaches you to trust processes that you cannot fully control or predict. And in doing so, it slowly reshapes how you respond to challenges. Eventually, what once felt like confusion begins to feel like guidance in disguise. You start to understand that not everything needs to make sense immediately. Some things are only understood in hindsight. And sometimes what feels like the wrong turn at first is actually the beginning of a better direction that you would not have chosen on your own. There are moments in life when everything feels normal on the surface, yet something deep inside quietly asks you to pause. You are living, moving, planning, speaking, responding to life as usual, but somewhere within your thoughts there is a subtle feeling that keeps returning. A feeling that tells you to slow down for a moment, to think again, to look at where you are heading, and to question whether you are truly aware of what is happening in your own life. Most people experience this feeling, but very few actually stop long enough to understand it. Every moment of life carries the possibility of reflection, but not every moment is treated that way. Often people move from one activity to another without giving themselves the space to truly process what they are experiencing. Days become routines, routines become habits, and habits become patterns that continue without interruption. In that continuous flow, awareness can slowly fade without a person even realizing it. Life continues, but reflection becomes rare. Yet, within this flow, there are always small openings, moments that feel slightly different from the rest. A pause in conversation, a sudden thought that interrupts routine thinking, a situation that doesn't feel completely ordinary, or even a quiet emotional shift that has no clear external cause. These are not random experiences. They are often moments that invite deeper awareness, moments that gently ask a person to step outside the automatic rhythm of life and observe more carefully. The difficulty is that most people are not used to recognizing these openings. The mind is often trained to focus on what is urgent, what is immediate, and what demands attention in the physical sense. So when something subtle appears, it is easily ignored or dismissed. A person might feel something internally but quickly move past it because there is always something else waiting to be done. Over time, this creates a pattern where reflection is postponed repeatedly until it becomes less frequent. But awareness does not disappear completely. It remains present in small ways, waiting for attention. Sometimes it appears in the form of a repeated thought that keeps coming back. Sometimes it appears as a feeling of dissatisfaction even when everything seems fine externally. And sometimes it appears as a moment of clarity that briefly breaks through the noise of daily life. These moments are often brief, but they carry significance that becomes clearer when a person learns to pay attention. Every human being has within them the ability to reflect deeply, but that ability becomes less active when it is not used regularly. Just like any other skill, awareness requires practice. When a person takes time to observe their thoughts, their reactions, and their direction in life, they begin to notice things that were previously overlooked. They start to see patterns in their behavior, in their decisions, and in the way they respond to different situations. This awareness creates understanding, and understanding creates change. Without reflection, life can feel like it is simply happening to a person rather than being experienced with intention. Events come and go, but their meaning is not always processed. Moments that could lead to growth instead pass quickly without leaving an impact. This is not because those moments lack importance, but because there is no space created internally to fully receive them. There is also a deeper level where reflection connects a person to themselves in a more honest way. When everything is quiet and distractions are reduced, a person is left with their own thoughts. In that space, it becomes possible to recognize emotions that were previously ignored, questions that were previously avoided, and truths that were previously pushed aside. This can feel uncomfortable at first, but it is often the beginning of clarity. Many people avoid reflection not because they do not value it, but because they are afraid of what they might discover. Silence can feel confronting when a person is not used to it. Without external input, internal thoughts become more noticeable, and that can bring up emotions that were buried under daily activity. However, facing those thoughts is often what leads to understanding and emotional balance over time. Even small moments of reflection can gradually change how a person experiences life. A few seconds of awareness before reacting, a brief pause before making a decision, or a quiet moment of thinking at the end of the day can slowly build a stronger connection with one's inner state. These small practices may seem insignificant, but they accumulate over time and create a more mindful way of living. When reflection becomes part of a person's life, decisions begin to feel more intentional. Reactions become less impulsive. Thoughts become more organized, and life itself begins to feel less overwhelming because there is a better understanding of what is happening internally. Instead of being carried entirely by external events, a person begins to participate in their life with greater awareness. There is also a sense of peace that comes from understanding oneself more clearly. Not everything becomes easy, and challenges still exist, but there is less confusion about why things are happening and how they are being handled. Reflection does not remove difficulty, but it changes the way difficulty is experienced. In the end, awareness is not something distant or complicated. It is already present in every moment, waiting to be noticed. It does not require extraordinary circumstances or special conditions. It simply requires a pause, a moment of honesty with oneself, and the willingness to look inward instead of always looking outward.